Hello, my beautiful, wonderful, glorious friends. This is a wonderful day. E3 2017 is done, and Nintendo, well, they had quite the showing, to say the least. I already gave you my live commentary, so now I thought I would hit on everything the Spotlight had to offer, beat for beat. It was a trim 25 minutes long, so that shouldn't be too hard. Let's get started. So first we were treated to this nice little sizzle reel. I missed most of it because my stream was messing up for some weird reason, but hey, no biggie. Then Reggie came in and laid down some deep philosophical stuff about games before the scene melted away. And this was, of course, a little cheesy, as this kind of stuff always is, but I felt like it did establish a certain tone. It conveyed a sort of a sense of wonder and fun. You know, I enjoyed it. The first game on display was Xenoblade 2, and I'm glad they started with a bigger budget, bigger scope game, you know, kind of set the tone further. The trailer didn't give a ton of info, mostly just like story stuff and visual elements, you know, not a lot of actual gameplay. For that reason, I assumed that they still didn't have a lot to show and that the game would most certainly not be coming this year. But then I saw that they had an extended gameplay demo in the Treehouse, so now I don't know what to think. I think there's still a really good chance they'll delay it. I mean, X took about 50 years to release after the first trailer, but I'm not quite as sure as I was. Also, based on the early footage, I wondered if the game was going to be like pared down and kind of simplified a bit, either to better suit handheld play or to speed up development or maybe even to reach a broader audience. It just kind of had a different feel to it, you know? Everything kind of felt close together or something. It was hard to put my finger on. But now that I've seen it more, I think it's just that stuff is bigger, so it's easier to see on a small screen. like I think that might be the only difference and the only thing throwing me off. I don't know though, it'll be cool to see more on this, and if it comes out this year, I will be pleasantly surprised. Next up is Kirby, and I'm gonna get a lot of flack from the Kirby fans out there, but Kirby is just never anything I get super excited over. We just get so many of them, and just a few months ago, I was poking fun at the April Nintendo Direct for announcing so many Kirby games, and here we are with another one already coming to the Switch. I have no doubt that all these games are fun, but I don't know, they just, to me, from an outsider's point of view, they all seem very samey. This one just kind of looks like more of the same. You just go around and suck up guys and take their powers and just, you know, some nice, simple, fun platforming. With local co-op, as many of the titles in the last several years have had. So basically there isn't anything more to say about it, except that I wonder how many other Kirby games are being developed for the Switch right as we speak. My guess is 5. Then we had Shinya Takahashi basically telling us that everyone at the company was really relieved that the Switch was doing so well, which you'll see gave me a pretty good chuckle in my commentary video. With the Wii U selling so poorly, I'm sure everybody there was just holding their breath, waiting to see if the Switch crashed on takeoff. Including this was a little surprising, especially specific use of the word relieved rather than just, you know, happy or pleased. It was the kind of personal little message that you don't usually get with big companies like this. They don't usually allow themselves to be so vulnerable. Next, he mentioned that a ton of multiplayer games are headed for the Switch, and whether or not this is a really great thing depends on who you are. Lots of people absolutely love playing with their friends, but I personally, as I've talked about a million times before, I prefer single-player experiences, so hearing stuff like this sometimes worries me a little bit. Not that I really should be worried, I know that, I mean, we already know of so many amazing single-player games, and of course, games like Kirby, for instance, can be played either way. It's just something I'm always kind of wary of. There's always that kind of small fear that at any given time, they'll just announce nothing but multiplayer games and I'll be left out in the cold. So then Ishihara from the Pokemon Company comes in and drops this bombshell on us. They're working on a true, mainline, quote-unquote core Pokemon RPG for the Switch. I've seen plenty of people who think it's silly to get so worked up without so much as a trailer, and of course people who were angry that Nintendo didn't have a Switch Pokemon locked and loaded already, but to me, this was purely awesome. Nintendo has a huge say in what the Pokemon Company does, but they largely let the guys handle the brand how they want. There have been multiple interviews that made the series' placement on the Switch seem a little shaky. Pokemon has always been a handheld series, so they weren't exactly sure how they would make it happen on something as powerful as the Switch. They said they would need to rethink how it works. As such, there was really no telling if they were going to get started on a Switch game, or just keep releasing 3DS ones for a few more years and see if the system gets a successor. All Ishihara did was say they were working on it, but that was enough. It's enough just to know that it is coming. Next year, we might just be playing the most amazing Pokemon game ever that we've ever dreamed of. If they started this recently, I'm a little bit doubtful that it will come by next year, but they do put out a ton of games, so I don't know, maybe they can do it. Maybe they've been working on it a lot longer than they've let on. He said it may not release for over a year, so I don't know, we'll see. Next, we were taken to space and saw some stars and junk flow by. I told myself firmly that I would not get my hopes up just because I was seeing stars and that this was probably a Star Fox Zero port with extra motion controls thrown in or something. Then all the star junk took a very familiar form, and for a brief moment, I knew what I was seeing but sort of froze. In that instant, I thought, okay, maybe Federation Force 2? Other M2? Some other iteration of one of my very favorite series that somehow makes me sad. Then there was a 4, and I died. If you haven't seen my reaction yet, can we pull up an audio clip? Thank you. So, obviously, this was huge. I'm gonna really talk about it in depth in a later video, but this was huge. As you might have noticed, this was, and has been for a long time, the #1 item on my list of games I want, but could never truly expect. Its inclusion was mind-blowing, and the sort of megaton announcement that can really make an E3 presentation. It's why we watch E3. The sort of thing that we hope for every single time Nintendo comes before us with new games to show. So then there was Yoshi, and personally, I felt like it fell a little flat. First off, it came right after Metroid, though that's not really its fault. I mean, what on earth could follow that? There should have just been 5 minutes of dead air for us to just comprehend and process the news. But being in the same presentation as Kirby also made Yoshi feel a little frivolous. It's just another co-op side-scroller, the kind of game that just plain doesn't really get me excited, you know? And while overall nowhere near the level of Kirby, it feels like we're just getting so many Yoshi games. Woolly World was only 2 years ago, and Yoshi's New Island was a year before that, and heck, the 3DS port of Woolly World released this year. It just kind of feels too soon, you know? It doesn't seem like a series that's important enough to develop back-to-back like this. However, I will say that the turnaround this time looks to be much shorter, as they're probably reusing a lot of assets and mechanics from Woolly World, and I'm actually fine with these kinds of sequels as long as they don't take a million years to come out and take up a huge amount of Nintendo's resources. Anyway, as always, it does look really cool. I think I might even like the papery look here more than I liked the yarn thing, and flipping the stages around and walking in 2 dimensions look pretty interesting. Visual games like these are always really fun to see unfold. You're welcome. Next was Fire Emblem Warriors. I don't really follow the series closely, and there have been so many Fire Emblems coming our way in the last few years I've lost track. I didn't even know which one I was watching until they showed the name. Once more, I didn't think fall 2017 was super likely, seeing as we just got a story trailer, but again, the Treehouse supplied a bunch of gameplay, and so I just don't know. Maybe this year's likely after all. That'd be pretty cool. I know some people who are really looking forward to this one. So Breath of the Wild DLC, that's exciting. I'm not going to dig into every little bit here. That's a subject for another time, but I do want to talk about the very first thing they showed, the Trial of the Sword. This is going to be a series of trials, presumably that you've got to beat all in one go, as we've seen in a few other Zelda titles. What got me hyped, though, was the fact that you start the trial with nothing. This concept is what made Eventide Isle so exciting. I get so tired of being so OP and just destroying everything that comes into my path. And that sort of slow build-up you see on Eventide, and, you know, even at the beginning of the game, is immensely satisfying, and you just don't get it a lot. The KV trial-y things from the other games were fun, for sure, but I really just wanted to blast through them to get the prize at the end, and they weren't particularly hard, but this looks like the sort of thing I could do again and again just for fun. And I might have to do again and again just to beat it. It looks hard. I'm just really looking forward to the challenge, you know? There's a ton of other stuff coming in the DLC, but like I said, we'll have to talk about that later. It was a little funny that all they gave us for the second DLC pack, the Champion's Ballad, was this little cinematic. So basically nothing. No info whatsoever. So hey, I guess it could be anything. And on a side note, those amiibo are pretty sweet. Next up, Reggie talked a bit about what was going down on the show floor, then we were given a little glimpse of Mario and Rabbids' Kingdom Battle. This showing wasn't nearly as in-depth as the one at the Ubisoft conference, but based on what I've seen, I'd say the game looks promising. I mean, the initial rumor was pure uncomfortable weirdness, but when I heard it was a tactical RPG with exploration elements, my interest was piqued, and when I finally saw it in action, I was decently impressed. I love how the characters can launch each other around the board and how everyone can get knocked around on the different levels and stuff. It'll be really interesting to see what is essentially a Mario game handled by an entirely different and even non-Nintendo studio, and I'm certainly looking forward to seeing more and hopefully playing it if they release a demo or something. This game seems like perfect demo material to me. Now, I was pretty impressed with the whole Rocket League thing. Not only is it a really smart choice for the system, but it comes with all the modes found on other platforms and cross-network play. I mean, we're just so used to the Nintendo versions of ports being held back somehow, so it's just great to see how they went all out on this one. It's everything a person could want from Rocket League on Switch, and I don't know, I think that's amazing. But then, of course, finally, was the new trailer for Super Mario Odyssey, and this was a heck of a pleasant surprise. First, I loved how at first I had no idea what the trailer was for, so, you know, then you see the hat on the T-Rex's head, and it's just like, what? This is Mario? How? But secondly, I was surprised by just how stinking incredible the trailer was. I mean, just based on the first trailer, Super Mario Odyssey already looked like it could easily be the best 3D Mario ever. I could have not possibly expected, however, that one additional trailer would make it look 3 times as good at least. I mean, I was already ravenous to play this game, and now I'm just... well, I guess I'm actually kind of numb. It looks so amazing that I can't even think or feel anymore. I have to just wait. Rarely in my life have I wanted to play a game this badly, and it's almost more than I can handle. So to even just live with this information in my head, I have to try my best to just not feel anything at all, lest I should literally go insane with anticipation. I have to live day by day just trying to not even remember that it exists. And Mario was the closer, bringing an end to one very interesting presentation. Then after the show, I was trying to get out my reaction video when I stumbled upon a very interesting little video on Nintendo's channel. It was, of course, a trailer for the 3DS Metroid 2 remake I've been gunning for years. Or I guess more accurately, since the 3DS was released. It was just a perfect fit. And, oh look, here it is, just hanging out here, being another Metroid. I can't even say I had much of a reaction, because it was kind of like with Mario Odyssey. It was so much awesomeness heaped on top of Metroid Prime 4 that I was just kind of numb. I was just kind of like, huh, so this is the reality I live in now. There are 2 Metroids in development. Okay. Then after that, we got a trailer for the Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga remake that's been rumored for a while, and this was a really pleasant surprise. Sure, one could argue that it's just another remake and that remakes are never anything super exciting, but just like Return of Samus, I liked what they communicated with this one. Of the Mario and Luigi games I've played, Superstar Saga was hands down my absolute favorite. It felt the most open, like a true adventure rather than a series of locations just to push through as you play out the story. It was the closest to Paper Mario, frankly, and I loved it. So not only is it awesome that they're acknowledging that old game instead of pulling a Paper Mario and just pushing ahead no matter what anyone thinks, but they also included something called Bowser's Minions. This extra story adds content and thus value to what would have otherwise been just a remake. Now I've got way more reason to pick this up even if I own the original, especially because seriously, a game starring Bowser's Minions? Finally! The comedy and charm potential is off the charts. I mean, I'm honestly surprised this isn't its own series already. So those were the reveals. Next, let's talk about the overall presentation. Now, I might be a little biased because it's Nintendo and, you know, Metroid Prime 4, but Nintendo really did a good job this year. People like to get a little up in arms whenever someone mentions the idea of one company or another winning E3, but you know what? It's all in good fun. It's just fun to work out who you thought did the best job. I don't know if I've ever been able to say this in my years of actively watching every conference, but I believe this year Nintendo did it. I'll admit that in part it's because not a lot of big stuff came out of the other conferences, things were a little bit mellow this year, but also obviously because Nintendo just plain brought the games. Sure, 2 of their biggest announcements were just promises without any real footage, but those announcements were still huge, and megatons like Metroid is, like I said, what E3 is for. I didn't feel like any other conference had anything even close to that big. And between all the other reveals and trailers, it was just a darn good showing. It was incredibly diverse. It hit on so many different genres and appeased so many different fan bases. It was a great mix of new and old. Nintendo presentations of the past have been pretty spotty. And you know what? This is true of any developer showing anything. Showing these long, boring things about games that not a lot of people care about, or just talking to a guy for way too long, basically just big spots of boring. But this Nintendo Spotlight was so to the point. Nintendo realized that we could get all the long gameplay demos and developer interviews we wanted in the Treehouse, so the Spotlight itself was speedy and constantly entertaining. Just a handful of guys presenting, never lingering on one game for too long. Nintendo spent so many years trying to refine their E3 experience, and I think they just perfected it. Short presentation for reveals and trailers and whatnot, hours and hours of Treehouse for in-depth coverage. I can't imagine this format being any better. They really nailed it. Suffice it to say, they've set the bar pretty high for themselves, and that's after a year where they hardly showed up at E3 at all, at least not with a bunch of big reveals. So, next year, who the heck knows what they've got in store? I really hope they stick to this format, but knowing Nintendo, they'll probably change things up again just to keep us on our toes. Kings of left field, after all. But at the end of the day, we know we can say one thing for sure. Metroid Prime 4! Ah!